Relapse is a touchy topic, especially when you're smack in the middle of a pandemic. Get it? Touchy might be too soon. Just go wash your fucking hands, people, and stay inside. Welcome to Young, Dumb, and Sober. I'm Allie, your host with the most, who's been diagnosed with several mental disorders. Oh, this is gonna be a long one. The old saying goes, ask and you shall receive. So I asked and I received. I recently asked my followers on Instagram what they would rather see a video about. Two options were either blacking out or relapse, and it was a very close tie, but relapsing won out. Everyone loves a good relapse. So in this video, I'll share the story of my relapse, give you guys some warning signs, and offer some tips for relapse prevention based on expert advice from people in the field of addiction. So the first time I tried to get sober, I was 26 years old, and it was 2016. The person I was in a relationship with at the time, who happened to be in recovery for a few months at that point, more or less gave me an ultimatum. Get sober or we break up. And I chose to get sober. We still ended up breaking up, but that's another story for another time and probably another channel. I jumped in with both feet to a 12-step program and managed to get sober from alcohol and pills for about 6 months. I even stayed sober through the breakup, which is actually pretty incredible for me. Relationships are very triggering because I was devastated after it ended.
The song is called I Am So Sad. I am so very, very sad. Goes a little something like this. Thank you.
Since I'm fortunate enough to not only have substance abuse issues, but also mental health issues, I mean, they're kind of one and the same, but whatever. I had been periodically seeing a therapist and a psychiatrist at the time. I mean, I've been seeing a therapist and a psychiatrist for as long as I can remember. For all intents and purposes, I was working a good program. I did everything that I was told to do. I took all the suggestions, I went through the steps, and I took especially serious the suggestion to avoid people, places, and things that might trigger me to drink or use again. So I stopped going out with my regular friends to my regular haunts and pretty much avoided any and all partying situations. But there was one problem. Well, there were probably several problems.
I love bad bitches, that's my fucking problem.
But there was one problem and one thing that I completely overlooked. I still have to go to the doctor, meaning the psychiatrist. And I really hadn't considered the fact that my habit of abusing stimulants and benzos was directly tied with the experience of going to the doctor and getting those prescriptions. In retrospect, it's pretty weird that I didn't put those things together because I got clean off those pills, so I knew that they were an issue to an extent, but for whatever reason, I just didn't think that I was in any danger by going to my psychiatrist because I was only getting non-narcotics at that point. At this point, I do look back and think it was probably a building reservation for me and that maybe I just didn't want to admit it to myself. But long story short, I went to the doctor for a routine checkup or to get my prescriptions filled for my non-narcotic medications, and ended up coming home with a low-grade painkiller that was abusable. So what did I do? I abused them, sis, and I didn't do it right away. It probably took 3 months for me to actually take the action of relapsing. For a little while, I was actually taking them as prescribed for anxiety, but the thing is that as soon as I left the doctor's office and I got downstairs to my car, the first thing I did was jump on Google and see how much of this particular drug I would need to take in order to get high if it was able to get me high. So that was a major red flag. Everybody who struggles with substance abuse has a routine around getting their drug or their drink of choice. For people who do heroin, just doing heroin isn't the whole experience. That's the end goal of this ritual that takes place where you talk to your dealer, where you get in the car, when you drive to them, what music you listen to, when you get there, when you pick it up, getting it prepared. I didn't realize part of my ritual was researching drugs that I could maybe abuse, prescription pills. So at that point, I should have known that I couldn't even take those normally. See, this is what people mean when they say that relapses happen way before you actually pick up the drink or the drug. It's a gradual progression in a way. or at least it was for me. So a few months later, when I already had this prescription in my possession and something external happened that brought up some kind of weird emotions and stress for me, I had the perfect excuse to use. And that's exactly what I did.
That is really, really, really not a good idea.
While I tried to continue my program of sobriety the next day, I actually ended up drinking as well because I kind of figured like, fuck it. I already screwed everything up. I might as well keep going. I just had a bunch of excuses as to why it made sense for me to keep using. And at that point, the phenomena of craving had already kicked in. So I was kind of screwed. Fast forward, I went to treatment where I stayed for 3 months and did some time in sober living. And I've been sober ever since. On May 9th of this year, I'll have 3 years of sobriety. So let's look at some of the potential warning signs of relapse. And keep in mind that this is not an exhaustive list. These things can also be considered triggers to relapse, so just keep that in mind as well. Like I said earlier, most relapses can be identified before the person actually gets high or drunk. And these relapses can be identified by paying attention to things like changes in attitude, feelings, and behaviors, all of which can gradually lead to that final step of picking up. So let's talk attitude shift. A study by researchers Terence Gorski and Merlene Miller in 2000 identifies a change in attitude as something along the lines of no longer placing your recovery as a priority. In my situation, staying sober didn't seem worth it to me anymore at that point. My attitude about sobriety, which was that it was something integral and good for my health and my well-being, no longer stood on solid ground. That belief wasn't there anymore, or at the very least, it was falling apart. Another possible trigger or sign of relapse is stress, which sucks because like we can't avoid stress. Many of us, after a period of clean time, revert back to our old ways of coping, especially when the shit hits the fan. And from what I've heard from people who have experienced relapse, which I think is somewhere around 90% of all people who are in recovery, is that it doesn't always have to be something insurmountable. Someone might be able to stay sober through the death of a parent or a loved one, or even a child, but not be able to stay sober after a bad day at work. The stress has the tendency to build up in our bodies and minds. And so the point at which someone might pull the trigger is kind of tough to identify. But generally speaking, a constant pattern of stress without any healthy coping mechanisms can definitely be seen as a warning sign. Another potential sign of relapse is a change in routine. First of all, changes in routine can be completely positive and healthy in many ways. And that's even true for somebody who's in recovery. But it gets tricky and it starts to smell and taste like relapse when the routine is changing for the worse rather than for the better. For instance, say somebody who periodically gets up every morning, meditates, connects with their sober network, prays, and reads a little bit of thoughtful literature. Starts not waking up early anymore, stops connecting with the people who support them, other people in recovery. Slowly but surely, each of those routines drop off. And habits can't be removed, they can only be changed. So unless that person is switching those good habits with other good habits consciously, there's a very good chance that negative or unhealthy habits are taking their place once they're falling to the wayside. These are for sure red flags. Some other more concrete examples of potential relapse signs include expressing concerns or doubts that somebody can maintain their sobriety, symptoms of depression and anxiety, expressing hopelessness or self-pity, withdrawing from social situations and activities or no longer connecting with people, spending time around people who use drugs and alcohol, expressing ideas that reflect this sort of overconfidence or minimization of their problem with substance abuse. So maybe they start saying, I really never had it that bad, or I think I pretty much had it under control. Using substances other than the one that was originally the problem of addiction, and even feeling particularly positive emotions. See, I think the piece about experiencing positive feelings is really important for us to think about, because most people tend to think that relapse comes after a period of depression or anxiety or negative emotions. That's not always the case. If you're somebody who abuses substances, you'll use and drink even in the face of positive emotions and experiences. Relapses are, I think, especially prevalent in people who are in early recovery, partially for this reason, because you go from numbing out your emotions, meaning all of your emotions, not just the bad ones or the negative ones or anything like that, but also the positive ones like joy, surprise, excitement. So when you are first getting sober and all those emotions come back and you're faced with your feelings, everything feels unfamiliar. So sometimes it's easier, or it just feels more natural to turn back to a drink or a drug. Some of the tips to prevent relapse are gonna go hand in hand with the signs and symptoms of potential relapse. Number one is know the signs. You need to identify what things come up for you that make you feel like using. 2, be aware of how you're feeling. Be aware of how you're feeling emotionally and physically. You gotta find healthy ways to cope with your shit, man. 3, get busy, fill your time. I don't care how you do it. Knit a fucking sweater, be of service to others, go volunteer in your community, write a book, read a book, do whatever you need to do if it's something that's going to fill your time and move your life forward and help your self-esteem, and it's not drinking or using drugs. Experimenting with new hobbies is a great one. I do a bunch of weird new shit now that I'm sober. 4, resist the urge to skip or back out of what you already do to support your recovery. So if you go to meetings, any type of meetings, not necessarily just 12-step meetings, keep going. Even if you don't feel like it, keep doing it. If meditation is part of your sobriety routine, keep doing it. You're not gonna feel like doing it every day, but feeling like it has nothing to do with it. You can still do something and not feel like doing it. You need to get connected with your why. Why do I do this? Why do I get up and meditate every day? Why do I go to bed at a reasonable hour? Because I know I'm gonna feel better the next day when I wake up and I got 8 hours of sleep. Why do I connect with other sober individuals? Because I need to feel a community of support around me with people who get me and people who I get, so we can share mutual connectedness. Find your why. 5, take care of yourself first. Many people in addiction recovery have the tendency to get into unhealthy or toxic relationships. We generally struggle with interpersonal relationships. Sometimes we struggle with codependency. So taking care of yourself first means possibly you might have to say no to people who ask you to do things that don't necessarily align with your sobriety or your recovery. You might have to take some time off of work. You might have to completely change your friend group. I mean, there are a number of different things that you might need to do to take care of yourself that could at first feel selfish, but is actually in the long run setting you up for success in your sobriety. 6, invest in healthy, strong relationships with other sober people as well as other people who could support your sobriety. Man, just cut out that toxic relationship shit, and you know if you have that person in your life, even if it's a family member, even if it's a significant other, you gotta cut your losses and rebuild connections with people who align with your life values now. That will help keep you further away from the drink or the drug. Guys, there's so much more out there that you can look into. Relapse is a huge topic. It's vast and it's expansive, and I could probably make a whole other video on it if I really wanted to, but I'm gonna end it here and remind you that even if you do relapse, it's okay. It's not a requirement. It does happen to most people who are in sobriety, but the best thing that you can do is just get back up and do what you need to do and start over again, and don't do what I did. Don't say fuck it and keep using or keep drinking. That's not gonna get you anywhere. So I want to hear from you guys. Have you ever relapsed before? And if so, and you feel like sharing, drop a comment below on some of the signs or symptoms that you exhibited prior to the relapse and what helped you to get clean again. For all you know, your comment might really help somebody who's in a similar situation. Hey guys, that's all I have for today. Help me spread the message by subscribing to Young, Dumb, and Sober and hitting the bell so you get notifications every time I upload new content. It's been real. It's mostly just been real today. This video has just kind of just been real, but it's still been fun. You know, it's been kind of fun. It's been real, it's been fun, it's been kind of really a little bit fun. So I'll see you guys next time. All right, bye-bye.